Okay, so what is this game and why start this channel? So firstly, the easiest and quickest way to explain this game would be to imagine what a game like Helldivers would be like if you were a wizard in a high fantasy world like Middle-earth, in an age where men have lost the world to the forces of darkness. So for the past 6 months I have been working on this indie project in my spare time, with no prior knowledge or experience, and so far I've been able to achieve pretty good results as there is a lot of information available on the internet about how to do this sort of things. And later in the video I will be showing off some of the features of the game that I've already been able to achieve. But that is part of the reason for this channel, because this is my first time doing something like this. I'm reaching into the global village known as the internet and trying to build a community around me, to simply share in the ups and downs which is solo development, and also to support me with the help and knowledge where I might fall short, as I simply do not know that which I do not know. And lastly, to reach out to people who would be willing to support me financially in the development of this game, as it would go a lot quicker if I was able to develop this game full time. So there will be a link to my Patreon account in the description below. So first, before doing a showcase of what I have achieved so far, I would just like to explain my approach to development, as some people might look at the material and think that it might not look all that impressive. And they would be right, as I am following a method where I iterate over certain game aspects, where I change the focus of the work on a bi-weekly basis, and where I mainly focus on implementing the features and getting them functional, making certain that they work within the game and the broader game environment. And then lastly, towards the end, I will be focusing on doing the polishing work and making everything look good, animation smooth, that sort of things. For me personally, it has the benefit of saving a lot of time and resources, because you quickly discover when certain features are not a good fit for the game. So instead of wasting hours on unnecessarily polishing models, and creating perfect animations, just to figure out after 2 weeks of animation work that a certain type of creature or enemy or a certain mechanic that you design does not work in the broader game environment. So I am expecting that showcasing my development like this in an open way will open me up to some criticism. However, I would just like to provide some context before receiving such criticism. Also, I am aware of the fact that the player, the end user, does not really give about the damn about the efficiency of the game, and mostly only ever experiences the polish, things like the models and the animations and the VFX and the sound, and therefore I will at a later stage definitely get some outside help to make certain that the looks and the feel of the game is of a much higher quality that I can ever achieve by myself only. So the elements in my loop that I go through are as follow, and sometimes they overlap, but the broad guiding categories are world building, working on the player, working on the enemies, the AI and its mechanics, and then on the home base or the tower, where we'll discuss later, and then some general game mechanics. So let's take a look at what I have been able to achieve so far. Okay, so in the world building category, I have managed to create a system with some fine controls which will in the future allow me to easily create new biomes and areas. My levels are procedurally generated at runtime, which means that there will be lots of variety in missions, and that no two locations or missions will ever be the same. This generation is not done by simply combining pre-made tile sets, but by creating a procedural plane mesh, overlaying it onto a noise texture, and then multiplying that noise with a float graph to have some finer control over the heights and the slopes. Then I apply an auto landscape material which uses height blending as well as slope blending to generate the landscape at runtime. Also, the foliage is added procedurally from an array based on a randomizer, putting down the foliage based on a percentage probability. This allows me in the future to simply swap out the textures in the landscape material and to swap out the foliage meshes in the array, and to have a brand new biome by tweaking some of the noise and float graph values. I'm very excited, as this will allow me to develop a larger world with a larger story, and to have different biomes with different elements that can alter the way in which the game needs to be played. I have also started to experiment with dynamic weather systems like dust storms, or just plain more dusty environments, as my first biome is a desert plains type of biome. And all of this is working over multiplayer as well and replicated, as the game will be developed for group play. Okay, so with regards to the player, I am currently saving up some money to have the player models done, as it will be a modular character with different armor sets that can be swapped out, but for now it is still the default mannequin. However, I have managed to get the basics of the animation blueprint going, having a free run, and an aim, and a strafe movement. I've also started to implement the beginnings of a dodge system, a working sprinting system, a working health system, death and resurrection system, as well as a spectate on death system. Also, some additional movement has been developed, like climbing onto things and vaulting over smaller obstacles. So the invocation system, which is inspired by the stratagems in Helldivers as well as the mechanic in Last Epoch for the Rune Master. It's also fully functional, although it is a bit more complex than the stratagems in Helldivers, as I really want players to feel the pressure in stressful situations when they try to invoke different spells. So the way this mechanic works is that all spells needs to be invoked by slotting runes into your staff in a certain order to invoke a rune word. However, whereas in Helldivers your stratagems always have the same sequence for the most part, and this causes the stress to become less over time as you learn to put in the combinations without thinking. In my system in this game, the input of the sequence depends on the order that you pack your runes into your rune bags before starting a mission. So let's say that you would like to use the firewall spell, and it has a sequence of force, fire, fire, force, and you would have these runes in the first 2 slots of your bag before you leave the tower. Then the sequence would be up, left, left, up. However, if at a later stage you decide to pack your bags differently, let's say you include a cold rune as well, as you will be going to an area where monsters are weak to cold damage, or your cold primary spells is simply just upgraded more, then in this case the same firewall spell will now have a sequence of right, up, right, as the runes are now in a different slot within your rune bags. Also, you will have multiple rune bags to cycle through. So for instance, if you need to call down a resupplies, you would first have to toggle to another rune bag, adding another layer of input, which can be very stressful in combat situations and create some interesting gameplay when trying to invoke some of the more complicated rune words. At a later stage, different staffs will be included, which will also have different effects on your spells, such as turning your normal ice bolt into a shotgun blast or your normal flame bolt into a flamethrower. Okay, with regards to the AI, I have managed to get a few enemy units up and running, 2 melee enemies, 2 range enemies, and 1 advanced enemy. The AI has basic search and attack functionality, with hitboxes that take damage and they can apply damage to the player, although my animations still need a lot of work. One advanced feature of the enemies is that any enemy can, under the right conditions, call in a reinforcement squad. However, if you manage to kill the AI before they send up the flares, the reinforcements will not be called in. The AI also have group behaviors, in that if you attack one enemy, it will automatically aggro all other enemies within a certain range. The shaman also has some advanced skills, in that she has her own contingency of bodyguards, from which she leeches life if you try to damage her. So you can either kill her entire company of bodyguards before you take her down, or alternatively keep applying the damage on her until she leeches all her allies to death. She will also have some capabilities in the future to protect her group from some of your more powerful aerial spells. There is also a blueprint in place, which I call the Hive Mind, which is able to group AI together and give them a swarm mentality. And at times it spawns patrols which tracks you or moves to intercept you, to make certain that the pressure is always applied. I've also managed to design these orc encampments, which also spawn dynamically in the level, and which counts as optional objectives to destroy, as well as a place to collect certain resources. And these tents will keep on spawning enemies periodically until you destroy them with certain spells or by throwing a bag full of unstable runestones into them. They also serve another hidden function in that all the tents left standing in a map influences the amount of enemies that will be called in as reinforcements, and it also influences the amount of enemies that will be part of the wave of enemies that try to stop you from extracting at the end of the mission. Oh yeah, and all these mechanics are also already replicated and works on multiplayer. With regards to the tower, this is probably the area that still needs the most work. However, the idea behind this is that this is like your in-between mission prep area, where you and your friends will lobby together and where you will start your missions from. It will include a lot of areas which still needs to be populated with NPCs, but it will be the area where you spend your resources that you gained in missions. You craft new runestones and armor and potions, you research and upgrade your spells, and a few other mechanics to boost your power and to make you a more formidable force in the world. There will also be different factions within your tower, which you will need to gain favor in order to get them to do certain required tasks for you. It will also contain a treasury area where all your wealth will be displayed, and in a later update when world bosses gets introduced, killing a world boss will enable you to mount its head on a trophy, which you can display here. In other words, this will be like your personal flex area where you can show off everything that you have achieved in the game. Okay, so as far as I'm aware, very early games or games still very early in development doesn't usually show the game in this state, but since this is my first time doing it, I am going to be showing everything openly. And so this is me just being open. So this is some of the game mechanics which are still in the infant stage, but just to give you guys an idea of where I'm at. So firstly, I have the beginnings of a harvesting system, which still needs to be fleshed out, obviously, exactly on the mechanic. But what I do want to show is that the system works as follows. Let's say I harvest this tree over here. Then I will have an in-mission inventory showing what I've collected so far. However, if you are playing with a friend, and let's say that the friend harvests this ruby vein over here, I will now be able to see both my own inventory as well as my friend's inventory, as everyone who is able to extract at the end of the mission will receive all the loot in all the surviving players' inventory. So in this case, if both of us are able to extract, I will get the 10 wood as well as the 10 rubies. However, if you are not able to extract, you will not be awarded any loot, and all your loot will be lost towards your friends. So, in essence, you should keep your whole team alive. I've also created and implemented a working crafting system with some different recipes and different types of crafts like potions and runestones, and it's working, fully functional. However, it still needs to be populated with all the recipes, but the system is fully functional. As for mission design, this is one area where I struggled quite a lot in the beginning, as there was a lot of moving parts which needed to be replicated and to be able to work across multiplayer. At the beginning, I was struggling a bit with this. However, I am now much more fluent in it. So visually for this next section, you will need a bit of imagination to follow along. But the first mission type so far will be to restore a tower of power, which the wizards in your tower needs to be able to see what is happening out in the world. So mechanically it works by going to 3 ritual sites where the shamans are using stolen runes of power to do some blood magic rituals. And once there you will have to defeat the shamans. You then collect the rune of power, return to the tower location, and here you have to dispel the shamanic wards which they have placed around the tower before you can insert the runestones into their places and activate the power. Once you have done this, a portal area will spawn in the world where you will have to activate runes around a portal in the correct sequence to open the portal back to the tower, all the while defending against the horde mechanic until the portal opens. Mechanically, the system works. Visually, it still needs a lot of polish, but this whole system is also replicated and ready to be played as a group. And that is my progress so far, which I've managed to make by teaching myself, as stated earlier. I would like to build a community around me and this game, and hopefully between building a YouTube channel and a Patreon support base, I will be able to develop this game full-time. So I would love to hear your feedback and take in your comments in the comment sections below. And if you wish to join this community to help me develop this game, you can start by just subscribing to this channel, leaving a comment, visiting my Patreon page in the description below. As this is a new community, your comments will be heard. I'm waiting for them. I'm also thinking of doing some educational content on this channel if you guys are interested in learning how to do some of these things yourselves. But I will be waiting from the community to hear if this is something that you will be interested in. Anyway, thanks for watching, and I really hope to hear from you guys soon.